When the morning bell rang inside Alcatraz on June 12, 1962, it echoed differently. Men rose from their bunks, rubbing their eyes, stretching, preparing for another day of routines that never changed. The guards walked the tiers with the same heavy steps, the same clipped voices, the same rigid posture that defined life on the rock. But none of them knew that by the time the sun rose over the bay, the island's history would be shattered. At 7:15 a.m., a guard approached Frank Morris's cell for the standard wake-up call. He rattled the bars. Morris didn't move. The guard leaned closer, annoyed, and barked, "Morris, wake up." Still nothing. A moment of irritation flickered across the guard's face as he pushed his baton through the bars and tapped the man's head. And that was the moment the prison changed forever. The head rolled. Not like a living person shifting in sleep, but like something hollow, something wrong, something lifeless. It turned just enough to reveal the painted cheeks, the clumps of hair glued on, the vacant eyes that stared not at the guard but past him, into some distant void. For a split second, the guard froze. The air turned cold around him. His heart hammered as he stepped back, breath catching in his throat. The head rolled again, tapping softly against the pillow. And in that moment, the guard realized the impossible. Morris wasn't in the bed, he was gone. The scream that tore through the cell block traveled like a shockwave. Sirens blared. Radios crackled. Boots thundered on concrete. Guards ran from every direction, faces pale, adrenaline spiking as they tore through the cells. When they reached the Anglin brothers' cells, the nightmare repeated itself. Two more fake heads staring up from the pillows, hair scattered, paint smudged, their hollowness mocking the guards with silent grins. Fear spread through the prison. Not because the inmates were loose inside the facility, but because they were nowhere to be found. The island had been breached. The unbreakable fortress had been broken. And the only question that mattered now was impossible to answer. Where did they go? The warden arrived within minutes. Warden Olin Blackwell was a stern man, always tense, always watching. His jaw clenched as he looked at the fake heads, and for the first time in years, the prison seemed bigger than him. He barked orders, voice shaking with equal parts anger and disbelief. Teams swept the cells. They discovered the holes behind the vents. They found the dust, the tools, the crude ventilation grates that had been carefully disguised. And then they moved into the utility corridor, where decades of darkness clung to the pipes like old ghosts. The corridor was tight and cold, smelling of rust and dampness. Flashlights cut through the shadows, illuminating the homemade workstations where Morris and the Anglins had crafted their tools. There were paint cans, makeshift drills, bits of broken metal. And then came the worst discovery of all, the raft materials. The raincoat scraps. The glue. The stitching tools. It wasn't just an escape. It was a plan. A detailed, tested, brilliant plan. The guards climbed up to the roof, following scuff marks and footprints preserved in dust. When they reached the far side of the building, they found a few scraps of rubber and wood left behind in the dirt, a sign the men had assembled something large. But when they reached the shoreline, the fog swallowed their view. The bay was empty, silent, deceptively peaceful. And the three men were gone. Later that day, the Coast Guard joined the search. Helicopters hovered over the water, blades slicing through the mist. Boats patrolled in tight grids, scanning for anything that didn't belong, anything that drifted out of place. Officers scanned the waves with binoculars until their eyes burned. For 48 hours, the search continued. Nothing. No bodies. No raft. No clothing. Only silence. But the ocean carries its own secrets, and it would not stay quiet forever. On June 14th, 2 days after the escape, guards found something washed up near Angel Island, a piece of rubber. Raincoat material. Torn and beaten by waves. A few hours later, a homemade paddle surfaced near the Golden Gate Bridge. And that's when fear shifted into suspicion. The water was freezing, the currents deadly. Even trained swimmers would struggle. Could Morris and the Anglins have survived the crossing? Or had the bay claimed them the way it had claimed countless others? The FBI took over the case. Agents combed through every inch of the island. They interviewed inmates. They interrogated guards. They studied tidal charts, water temperatures, nighttime current maps. One fact stood out. At midnight on June 11th, The currents were dragging toward the Golden Gate Bridge, the direction the raft was found drifting 2 days later. The FBI liked certainty, predictability, evidence that told a clear story. But the ocean did not deal in clear stories. It dealt in chaos, shadows, and fog. And for the first time, the FBI faced something it couldn't easily solve. If the men had drowned, their bodies should have surfaced. But none ever did. If the men had made it, they would have needed food, money, clothing, a place to hide. But no proof surfaced of that either. Rumors began almost immediately. Some said they saw footprints on Angel Island. Others claimed to have heard a scratching sound on their boat that night. One fisherman swore he saw a raft drifting in the fog, but when he approached it, the figures vanished into the mist like ghosts. Back in Georgia, the Anglin family received strange signs. Every Christmas, 4 years, flowers appeared at their mother's grave. Unmarked. Paid in cash. Left by an unknown visitor. Their mother insisted her sons were alive. She felt it in her bones, she said. And she would wait for them as long as she lived. The FBI dismissed these ideas as grief-fueled fantasies. But the story didn't end there. In 1964, 2 years after the escape, a man claimed he saw Clarence Anglin in Brazil. He described a man with piercing eyes, a quiet demeanor, and a southern accent. The FBI investigated. Nothing came of it. But rumors kept spreading, growing like vines around the truth. Then came the strangest claim of all, the photograph. Decades later, a family member of the Anglins produced a faded photograph taken in Brazil. 2 men standing side by side. One with thick hair, the other with a lean face. Both older. Both sunburned. Both smiling. A forensic expert declared the photo had a high probability of being the Anglin brothers. But there was no proof. Only suggestion. Only shadows. Frank Morris left no trace at all. No sightings. No letters. No whispers of his existence. Some believed he drowned the first night, slipping from the raft into the freezing blackness. Others believed he made it to shore, lived quietly, and vanished into a life without mistakes. The scariest part came later, what nature revealed. In 1962, the police found something lodged beneath a rock near the bay, a wallet. Inside, they found identification cards belonging to the Anglins. But here's the part that sent chills down the spine of investigators. The cards were untouched by water. No warping. No mold. Nothing. Almost like someone placed them there on purpose. Then there was the chilling note the FBI received years later. A letter mailed anonymously. The handwriting shaky, the message simple. This is John Anglin. I will tell you everything if you promise I won't go back to prison. The letter gave no proof. No details. But the FBI never officially dismissed it. They only kept it classified. Even now, historians debate. Experts argue. Some believe the men died that night, swallowed by the bay's icy grip. Others believe they made it, escaped into South America, and lived quiet lives far from the walls that once held them. But Alcatraz itself holds a different kind of truth, one that can't be easily explained. Visitors say that late at night, when fog rolls over the island, you can hear the echo of faint paddling. The sound of oars dipping into water. Some say they hear footsteps in the upper corridors, where no one has walked for 60 years. A few claim that inside the old cell block, a cold breeze passes through the utility corridor, far colder than the rest of the building. A haunting reminder of the night 3 men slipped through the walls like ghosts. Whether they lived or died, one truth remains: they escaped. They beat the rock. They cracked a fortress designed to hold the worst of men. And they did it with spoons, raincoats, and the kind of patience only desperation can forge. Today, the escape remains one of America's greatest unsolved mysteries. No bodies were ever found. No confirmed sightings. No confession. Just whispers carried on the wind that blows across the bay, whispers that feel colder than the water beneath. Some say the men became legends because they lived. Others say they became legends because they vanished. But this much is certain. On June 11, 1962, 3 men disappeared into the night. And the ocean, the island, and time itself swallowed the truth whole. And to this day, the world still asks the same question, one that floats above the waves like a ghostly echo. Did they survive, or did the bay take them? 1 escape. 3 men. No bodies. No answers. Just a disappearance that still haunts the dark waters of San Francisco Bay. And a mystery that refuses to die.